Hello and welcome back. This is Perry and you're watching Tesla DIY. I finally finished bagging the Model Y, my wife's Model Y, and next to it is my Model 3, also on air suspension. So in this video is going to be more of a informational video, so nothing fancy, no B-roll, nothing. Before I start, let me go over what I have. What's the choice of suspension and management for my Model Y? This time around, I decided to go with UAS from SoCal because I have heard nothing but good things about UAS. The sleeve back in the front allowed the car to ride a lot smoother and rises up a lot higher. I'm going to show you in a bit, along with Airlift 3H with a seamless tank this time, dual compressor, 444C, and I have a pretty cool Frunk setup in my opinion. I'm going to show you in a bit. So in this video I'm going to mainly go over how to get your constant 12 volt to power your system and your on and off, basically your ignition, how and when you want the system to be powered on so you don't drain your battery, and how to calibrate and set up your height sensor, how to mount them and get your sensor reading level correct so you can go through your calibration and the whole system work as it should. So let me pop the front real quick. Okay, so what you're looking at is a seamless tank, 4 gallons, 6-inch diameter, 32 inches long. This is a MDF board platform that I wrap in a acoustic fabric. It gives a really nice OEM look in my opinion. It was elevated because it has to go past this bump because of the newer Tesla has the heat pump underneath, so this the top is smaller on the bottom, so it rises up. I use the space to house my 444C, 2 of them, and they're rotated. I have to remove the bracket and rotate them so they sit sideways instead of straight up. Also space off. Right now it's kind of ghetto, but I'm gonna make a better looking spacer for the drain port. And right here I have the air outlet from the tank to the water trap, and in between I have a block valve, 1/4-inch tubing end block valve that I can shut, and then a pressure relief valve to push the pressure downstream of this valve once it's closed. And if you're wondering where is my manifold, and that's where I got tricky. I mounted the manifold right here. I designed and 3D printed a platform that mounts directly to the cross structure beam using all existing holes that was already drilled on the support beam. The benefit of having the manifold outside of the top area is that you have all 4 corners of the air hose coming into the manifold all outside of the top, so you have nothing other than the air inlet hose that's passing through the top, making removal much easier. You don't have to unplug 4, 5 air hose in order to remove the entire front setup. And then my water traps here, so one hose goes through the top into the water trap and then into the manifold. For the front bags I also have these pressure control valve adjustable to just slow down the front because the sleeve bags likes to drop pretty fast. With that being said, I can shut this valve, push the pressure downstream, unplug the 2 harness for the compressor. Within 26 seconds I could have the entire tank and compressor and the platform out of the car and onto the ground. At the same time, the car is still pressurized and you can still drive it the way it is without the tank and the compressor in the front. So it'll look completely OEM in the front, minus the hole I drilled to pass through the harness and the single air hose. I'll put the camera on the tripod and show you how that works. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is let's put the car up at my ride height first. That way you know the car is pressurized. There you go. So this is my ride height. And then as you can hear, the compressor just kicked in because air just went out of the tank into the bags. So when I shut the door, the entire system turns off. I'm going to show you the wiring process in a bit to explain how that works. But right now, I'm going to put a timer up just to show you how long it takes for me to have this entire setup out of the car. So I'm going to put my phone here too. just so I can show you what's going on here. So let's start it. So I'm gonna close this valve, and then I'm gonna push the pressure. That way I can release this end easily, and then unplug both of the compressor harness, and that's it. The entire tank's out of the car, and the car is still pressurized. Show you. Yep, still at 124. Don't know if you saw, but the car showed 0 psi at the tank because obviously the tank is out of the car. So, and then let me show you. This is what I've got left in the car. I could easily just tuck that back out of the top area, and the whole front is basically OEM looking. And then putting it back, it's gonna take a little bit longer, about 40 seconds to put it back. Then you can move on and continue driving. I don't know why you would do that, but you could have the entire setup in the trunk while you drive it. And then when you need to pump up or anything, just put the tank back in the front. But this is good for surfacing, or if you just want to work on something else other than the air suspension that is underneath the front. For example, your headlight. If you want to remove your bumper, if you want to install power frunk, whatever the reason is. So I thought that was pretty cool. With that being said, I will now go to the back of the car and show you how everything is wired up. Alright, so here we are in the back seat of the Model Y. As you can see, this is the solid state relay, and you can see the light currently is on. And if I close the door, the light turns off. That's because the way I have it wired, the ignition wire connects to the center console light, and the center console light is off when the doors are closed. When the light is off, that means the relay circuit is open. So when I open the door, the center console light turns on, which then feeds power to the relay to close the circuit, which then provide power to the airlift system. So if I pop this guy open, alright, so what we have is a set of input and output. So here at number 4 terminal, it is connected to the ground, and then at number 3, which is the input side, we have a T-splice that connects to the thin brown wire, which is the center console light. And then on the output side, we have number 2 terminal connects to this thick blue wire, which is a constant 12 volt. And then on output number 1 terminal goes to the pink wire, which is the airlift system. This is not the only way you could do it. I know some people connect it to the driver's seat sensor, which then if you are sitting on the driver's seat, then the sensor will sense that there is weight on the seat, then it will power on the system. I believe that's how it works. But this is how I do it, and you could try doing it my way, or you could do more research and see how other people does it. So with this setup, you basically prevented the system to kick in randomly. If your tank has a leak, then your compressor is going to want to kick in to fill the tank. For example, mine kicks in at about 180 because I have it set at 200 psi. So if my tank was to leak and drops under 180 psi, then my compressor is going to want to kick in. I may be sleeping, I may be away from home. The compressors might kick in multiple times while I'm asleep, but because I have it wired so the system is completely shut off when the doors are closed, then the system will just never kick in. But if I ever want to remotely air up and down the car, basically have the airlift system stays on, I could use the camp mode from Tesla. Will keep the system powered on, because what camp mode does is to keep your air conditioning on and all the power accessory on. So, but that has to be done beforehand. I have to turn that on before I walk out of the car. But if I were to be away from the car and all of a sudden I want to air up or down the car for whatever reason, I can also turn on all my heated element, like turn my temperature up, heated seat on, defroster on. I find that also powers up the system anytime, can be done remotely, and that's usually what I do. Also Sentry Live video also activate the system. And lastly, if you have home link, which I do, that also provide power temporary for about 30 seconds. So if you want, you could activate your home link, and within the next 30 seconds or so, you can try to connect to your Airlift system, because during that 30 seconds the system is on. So yeah, that's how I get my 12 volt and my ignition wire. Now let's talk about the height sensor mounting and calibration. Okay, so now with the wiring all out of the way, let me show you how high this thing rises up. It's kind of crazy. And unfortunately, because it takes so much pressure to fill the bag, currently the 4 gallons is not quite enough to go from ride height to fully max height with a single filled up in the tank, even with the 200 psi in the tank. So I also designed and 3D printed this little platform holder thing for my controller that sits on the charging pad, because the charging pad was trying to charge the controller because it just thinks that it was the phone or something. I think I can go see it's still going higher a little bit. The back's pretty much maxed out, even though I could put more air in it, but it's not going to go any much higher. So right now is probably the highest setting. It's, you can see on the outside camera right here, is pretty crazy. And I'm going to bring the camera in to show you the wheel gap. I would say it is about 2, even 3 inches higher than a factory ride height. I mean, I could fit an entire hand in between the gap and there's still room. Same as the back. The back might even have more room. I could even sneak my camera back here, which I guess I could show you the height sensor mounting and everything. So this is the UAS strut. It's a 24-way dampening adjustable, and then right there is the airbag that replaces the spring, and right there is the height sensor and the bracket I made out of sheet metal with the help of my buddy Kevin. He made me a template. I 3D printed them, and then I chased it on a sheet metal and just made some vents, drilled some holes, made a metal version of it. So the height sensor is going to be using the existing holes that was already there from the factory car, which they intended to put air suspension, or maybe for the Euro spec car, which has the height sensors for their headlights. So I'm using that location to mount my height sensor. So that goes on the car that's fixed, that shouldn't be moving. And on the moving part of the car, you want to tie that onto the suspension. I still have the OEM camber and tow arm, so I tie that to my camber arm, and that has a OEM tab on it. Once again, I think Tesla intended to put some sort of a height sensor on the car from the factory, so that's a factory location to mount on. To be honest, my height sensor location isn't the best, so the travel range is not very ideal. I'm going to put up some footage of when I was installing it, where I explain how to get your height sensor range to be set up correctly with the help of the app, the sensor tool. I'm going to be taking the rear suspension, and I'm going to be needing the top hat from the OEM suspension. And from what I was told, I'm going to have to drill this hole bigger because the universal air strut top, it's a little bit thicker. It's big boy, so we got to drill that to clear. So I'm going to do just that. And the bit I'm using is 15/32, seems to be the good size after I drilled it out. And then this is the factory one. I don't know if you can see the difference. Because I specified that I want to run 1/4 inch lines, so Universal Air provided these, looks like 3/8 MPT to 1/4 inch push to connect elbow and some straight. Okay, so this is the height sensor rod that I have to figure out how long this has to be. And in order to figure that out, I'm gonna be putting the shocks back in. I already have the weir bag installed and hooked up to the air source. So I could fill up that bag, and that way I know it's gonna get to the max height. And then on the app, if I go to setup, sensor tool, and as you can see, there is a sensor level reading. So what it does is, when this thing pivot, the sensor level is gonna change depending on what position it is at. So I'm gonna put the struts in, so that way the suspension position is set at its natural position. And then I'm gonna release the air from the back, use a floor jack to compress the suspension all the way to the max, basically the max low height, which is how low the car is gonna sit. And then I'm gonna look at this and make sure that the reading is not gonna throw an error. See, if I go too far, then it goes into the red and then it's gonna throw an error. So we want to stay in that green zone within that range. So yeah, I'm gonna put the struts back in and then start measuring and cutting the rod. So basically, when you have all four corners up in the air and then you want to put a jack on the wheel or just the lower control arm and release all the air in the bag if you have, and then jack the lower control arm all the way up and look at the app and see if the sensor reading is too low or too high. If it reaches all the way to the left or all the way to the right, then that means you're out of range. So you want to adjust, either rotate your height sensor, or you want to pick a different hole on the sensor, or lengthen your rod. Whatever it takes, make sure you're within the range when you're fully compressed. And then same thing for a max height, you want to put air in the back so the suspension is fully extended. Then you want to make sure that range is also not maxed out. So if you have the max low and max high within range, then you should be good to go. And then for the front, is gonna be the same thing. We're looking at the front UAS bags right here and height sensor. This is mounted to the frame as well, but there's only one tab, the existing tab that I'm using, the push tabs, and then double-sided tape to the frame. I cleaned the frame really well and then use double-sided tape to tape it on. I could use a self-tap, which I might just do later, but for now it's holding up just fine. And then same thing here with the arm connected to the upper control arm, which also has a factory mounting. So you just connect that to a moving point of the suspension and then do the same thing. Release all the pressure in the front back. Use a floor jack to jack up the lower control arm so it's fully compressed, and then check your sensor reading. See if it's too far to the right or too far to the left. If it's within range, then put air in the back. That way you have the suspension fully extended. Then once again, check your range and see if it's within range, and if it is, then you should be good to go. And as far as the suspension length, your struts can be adjusted too. So if you want to lengthen the struts, if your car is airing too low, then you might want to extend your struts to a longer length. Sometimes your upper control arm will hit the top of the frame, which I'm gonna put up a photo. I had that on my first try, and what I did was extended the overall length of the suspension. The problem I was having was when I'm fully aired out, the upper control arm hits the frame before the backs were even fully deflated. So I still have plenty of pressure in the backs, but then it wasn't allowing me to go any lower because the upper control arm was already hitting the top of the frame. I lengthened the struts, that way I could air it out all the way before the upper control arm hits the frame. So you're still going to be aired out at the same height. Your car is still going to be sitting just as low, but the amount of lowering was dependent on your bags being deflated and not because your strut travel was maxed out, if that makes sense. So the front strut of the UAS comes with a leader host, which I have it mounted on this OEM bracket with a 10mm, which I had it facing down just because you don't want it to be facing up, so any dirt or debris can potentially get into the hose. So right here, this one is for the front strut. As you can see, it goes from the front strut to the leader hose and then out and into the car, which then goes to the manifold. And then this hose right here is for the rear left hand side, which goes around the fender liner and then into along the coolant channel to the back and out and then into the rear bag. So I just realized that my mic was off when I was recording this part, so I'm just gonna voice it over. Basically what I was talking about was comparing the two different cars I have, one on Air Demand and one on UAS. The things I find different and what I like and don't like about UAS is that on the UAS, because of the front sleeve bag design, it likes to air out very fast, very aggressive, which is why I added that adjustable flow control valve, which kind of fixed the issue. But yeah, I think this is about all I have to share based on my install experience on this UAS system on my Model Y. If I missed anything, go ahead and leave me a comment below, or you can find me on IG as most of you have. But yeah, if you want to follow the build, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll be posting more DIY installation on both cars as parts comes in. Anyways, thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.